I found the bill in my mailbox before I found the damage, and that was the part that almost made me laugh. Not because it was funny, but because the audacity had a sound to it, a dry little crackle of paper in my hand, while the July heat pressed down on my porch like a wet blanket. The envelope was thick, cream-colored, stamped with the silver pine logo from the gated neighborhood next door, the kind of logo people use when they want a bill to look like a court order. I slid my thumb under the flap, pulled out 3 pages of polished nonsense, and there it was in bold print. $18,700 for water system protection and emergency drainage work. My name was typed underneath like I had ordered it myself. Caleb Whitaker. Due upon receipt. The cicadas were screaming from the fence line. Somewhere beyond the barn, a diesel engine coughed, then idled low and mean. I looked up across my east pasture, past the dry Johnson grass and the old cottonwoods, and saw fresh tire tracks cutting through the clay. Then I saw the fence. My fence. The one I had patched by hand 2 weeks earlier. 2 posts were snapped sideways, the wire peeled open like somebody had unzipped my land. Beyond it, a muddy trench ran straight toward my lower reservoir, raw and black against the yellow grass. The smell hit me next. Wet dirt, hot plastic pipe, diesel fumes, and that sharp metallic tang of freshly disturbed earth. I walked down there with the bill still in my hand, my boots sinking into the soft edge of a ditch I had never approved, never discussed, never even been warned about. A length of black, corrugated pipe sat half-buried in the trench, aimed downhill like it belonged there. Survey flags I had paid for were trampled flat in the mud. 1 orange stake had been snapped in half and left beside the tire ruts like a cigarette butt. That was when my phone rang. No name on the screen, just a local number, and the kind of timing that tells you exactly who is on the other end. I answered without saying hello. Mr. Whitaker, a woman said, her voice smooth enough to pour over pancakes and cold enough to frost the glass. This is Vivian Cartwright from Silver Pines Estates. I assume you received our notice. I looked at the trench, then at the pipe, then at the broken fence. Notice, I said, is an interesting word for trespassing. She gave a soft little laugh, practiced and weightless. We're not trespassing. We're protecting the community water system. If you want to live next to a proper neighborhood, you need to respect how that system works. A gust of wind dragged dust across the pasture and rattled the loose wire against a post. Respect. That was the word she chose while her crew had just carved a wound through my farm and billed me for the knife. Vivian, I said, keeping my voice even, my land isn't part of your HOA. Water doesn't care about property lines, Mr. Whitaker. She said it like a warning, like wisdom, like she had just placed the final piece on a chessboard she owned. I stared toward the old pump house at the base of the hill, the faded tin roof flashing dull red in the sun. Behind it, buried under 1,000 acres of pasture, stone, creek bed, and history, ran the pipes nobody at Silver Pines seemed to want to talk about out loud. I had bought Whitaker Bend Farm 3 months earlier for quiet, for space, for a chance to rebuild something honest after years of designing irrigation systems for people who saw water as a line item on a budget. What I had not realized yet was that the perfect green lawns, the clubhouse pool, the fountains at the Silver Pines gate, and the sprinklers hissing at 2 in the morning during a county drought warning all had one thing in common. They were drinking from my land. And Vivian Cartwright had just sent me a bill for my own water. I stood there for a full minute after Vivian hung up, listening to the dead tone fade from my ear while the pump house ticked in the heat like something alive. The strange part was not that Silver Pines had tried to push me around. Wealthy neighborhoods do that with polished letters and soft voices all the time. The strange part was how comfortable she sounded saying our water system while standing on a lie that was buried under my soil. 3 months before that morning, Whitaker Bend Farm had looked like the answer to a prayer I was too tired to say out loud. I had spent 16 years as a hydraulic engineer, designing irrigation layouts, stormwater basins, livestock wells, and drainage plans from Oklahoma down through central Texas. I knew how water moved through clay, limestone, gravel, pressure tanks, and bad decisions. I also knew what happened when people built first and asked questions later. After my father passed, the office lights started feeling too bright. Every project looked like another set of blueprints for land I would never touch. So when the listing came up for 1,000 acres outside Mason County, with a farmhouse from the 1960s, 3 barns, 2 ponds, a lower reservoir, In an old pump station, I drove out before sunrise and walked the place alone. The grass was waist-high in some spots. The west pasture was rough with mesquite and cedar. The barn doors groaned when I pulled them open, and the air inside smelled like hay dust, old motor oil, and mouse-chewed cardboard. It was not pretty in the way subdivision people use that word. It was honest. The soil had cracks in it. The fences leaned. The windmill near the north tank squeaked every fourth turn like it was clearing its throat. But when I stood on the hill behind the house and watched the morning light hit those acres, I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in years. I bought it because I wanted quiet. I wanted to repair things with my own hands. I wanted to bring cattle back to the lower pasture, clear the creek, fix the south barn roof, and maybe sleep through a whole night without a phone buzzing about a busted retention pond somewhere. Silver Pines Estates sat along my eastern boundary like another country. Stone entrance pillars, black iron gates, perfect lawns, cameras tucked under the eaves. A clubhouse with a blue tile roof and a fountain that ran even during drought restrictions. Their sprinkler heads whispered in neat little rows at 2 in the morning, throwing mist over grass so green it almost looked fake. I noticed that the first week, everybody else along the county road had brown yards and dust on their trucks. Silver Pines looked like a golf course in a magazine. I figured they had deep municipal rights, private storage, or some expensive reclaimed water system built into their dues. It was not my business, so I let it sit in the back of my mind. Then came Vivian Cartwright. The first time she drove up my gravel road, she did not park by the house. She stopped beside my equipment shed and looked at my tractor, my water tanks, and my old flatbed like they were personal insults. Her white Lexus shone so hard in the sun it hurt to look at. 2 board members trailed behind her, both holding folders, both wearing the expression of people who had mistaken matching polo shirts for authority. Vivian smiled at me like she had already forgiven me for being disappointing. She said the farm created visual inconsistency near a premium residential community. I told her the farm had been there long before the premium residential community. Her smile did not move, but her eyes did. They went past me toward the lower reservoir, then down the slope toward the pump house. Just one quick glance. Easy to miss if you did not spend your life watching water. That was the first time I felt it. Not anger. Not yet. Just a small cold click in my mind, like a valve turning somewhere underground. Vivian Cartwright did not raise her voice that first afternoon. That was her gift. She could walk onto land she did not own, insult everything a man had worked for, and make it sound like a neighborhood courtesy call. She stood beside my equipment shed with one manicured hand resting on her folder, her white sunglasses pushed up into her blonde hair, her expression arranged into something that almost passed for concern. Behind her, the 2 board members kept shifting their weight in the dust like they were afraid the farm might rub off on their shoes. "Caleb," she said, using my first name like we were old friends. "Silver Pines has spent years establishing a certain standard along this corridor. Buyers pay for consistency. They pay for safety. They pay for beauty." I looked past her at my pasture, where a red-tailed hawk circled above the tree line and the wind moved through the dry grass in long, silver ripples. "Sounds expensive," I said. Her smile tightened just enough to show the edge underneath. "It is an investment, and neighboring properties can either support that investment or damage it." She opened the folder and pulled out color photographs of my own land. My leaning cattle gate, my stacked irrigation pipe, my old Ford flatbed parked beside the barn, the faded blue water tank near the windmill. Each picture had been printed, labeled, and placed in a plastic sleeve like evidence at a trial. The paper smelled faintly of toner and perfume. "These conditions create visual distress," she said. "The HOA board believes some voluntary improvements would prevent future conflict." Voluntary. That word landed in the dust between us with a little thud. I had heard it before from developers who wanted drainage easements for free, from county planners who wanted private landowners to absorb public problems, from consultants who smiled while sliding liability across a table. "My property is agricultural," I said. "It is outside your covenants, outside your gate, and outside your authority." One of the board members, a narrow man with a golf visor and pink cheeks, cleared his throat. "Water flow crosses boundaries, Mr. Whitaker. Drainage impacts do not stop at a fence." Vivian gave him a quick look, and he shut up so fast I almost heard his teeth click. There it was again. Water. Not weeds. Not fences. Not visual distress. Water. I let the silence stretch until even the cicadas seemed loud. Are you here about my view? I asked. Or my drainage? Vivian closed the folder slowly. Her nails made a soft tapping sound against the cover. I am here about being a good neighbor. Then she pointed toward the lower field where the old pump house sat half-hidden behind cottonwoods. That area has always been part of the broader community infrastructure. The previous owners understood that. The air changed. Not enough for her to notice, but enough for me. A hot breeze pushed the smell of cedar and dry soil across the yard. Somewhere in the shed, loose sheet metal popped in the heat. I kept my face still. Do you have a recorded easement? I asked. We have history, she said. History is not a deed. For half a second, her smile disappeared. What replaced it was colder, flatter, and much more honest. Then the smile came back, polished and empty. You are new here, Caleb. I would hate for you to start your relationship with 312 families on the wrong foot. There it was. Not a request. A warning dressed in linen. She handed me a packet before leaving. Suggested landscape improvements. Approved fencing styles. A recommended screening plan for agricultural equipment. And at the back, a page titled Water Access Cooperation Guidelines, with no county seal, no legal description, and no signature from anybody who owned my land. I watched her Lexus roll back down my gravel drive, tires crunching over caliche, dust rising behind her like smoke from a bad idea. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table with the packet spread under a yellow overhead light. The farmhouse still smelled like old pine cabinets and the black coffee I had forgotten to drink. I read every page twice. Most of it was nonsense. But the water access page had 3 words circled in blue ink before it ever reached me. Existing service corridor. I ran my thumb over that phrase and felt the first real spark of anger. Not because she had tried to scare me, because she had shown me exactly where to start digging. The trench appeared 8 days after Vivian left that packet on my kitchen table. I remember the exact sound that woke me because it did not belong on a farm morning. Not cattle shifting near a gate. Not wind pushing through cedar branches. Not the old refrigerator humming in the kitchen. This was hydraulic machinery biting into earth, a heavy metal growl followed by the wet scrape of a bucket dragging through clay. I sat up before the clock hit 6. The room was still blue with dawn, and the air smelled like dust and yesterday's coffee. Then the backup alarm started outside, sharp and steady. Beep, 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 cutting through the quiet like a warning I was already too late to answer. I pulled on jeans, boots, and a work shirt, and by the time I reached the porch, the eastern pasture was crawling with strangers. 2 white utility trucks sat near my broken fence. A compact excavator straddled the slope below the cottonwoods. Orange cones marked a line from the silver pine's boundary straight toward my lower reservoir. The ground was torn open in a clean, deliberate path, and a crew was laying black pipe into the trench like they had done this 100 times before. For a few seconds, all I could do was listen. Diesel engine. Clanking chain. Men calling measurements. Mud sucking at boots. Water moving somewhere beneath the soil with that low, patient sound only a waterman hears. I walked down the hill with my jaw locked, so tight it made my teeth ache. The foreman saw me coming and lifted one hand. Not friendly, not scared, just annoyed that the owner of the land had interrupted his morning. You Caleb Whitaker? He asked. His vest was clean, his clipboard cleaner. You are on private property, I said. He looked down at the paper like the paper owned more than I did. We have a work order for emergency water access and drainage stabilization. Signed by who? He turned the clipboard around. Vivian Cartwright's signature sat at the bottom in blue ink, big and looping, like she had autographed a trophy. Above it were the words Silver Pines Emergency Water Access Zone. No legal description. No county permit number. No easement reference. Just enough official language to fool somebody who did not know better. I took out my phone and started recording. The foreman's face changed when he saw the red dot on the screen. Sir, I am just doing the job I was hired to do. Then say the address you were hired to work on. He hesitated. Behind him, the excavator bucket paused in the air, dripping dark mud onto my pasture. Silver Pines East Service Corridor, he said. This is Whitaker Bend Farm, I answered. There is no Silver Pines corridor here. That was when Vivian arrived, rolling across the pasture in her white Lexus as if dirt itself had no right to stick to her tires. She stepped out wearing cream-colored slacks, oversized sunglasses, and that same calm expression people use when they have already decided your anger proves their point. "Caleb," she called. This could have been handled cooperatively. The smell of churned-up clay and diesel hung between us. I pointed at the cut fence, the crushed survey stakes, the pipe half buried in my soil. "You entered my land without permission." She removed her sunglasses slowly. "We acted to protect 312 households from potential disruption." "Disruption you created?" "Disruption you created by refusing to acknowledge existing community infrastructure." Her words were smooth, but her eyes kept flicking toward the pump house. Once, twice. She was not worried about drainage. She was worried about access. I asked her for the recorded easement. She said the board had long-standing operational rights. I asked for the permit. She said the county was aware. I asked why her crew cut my fence before sunrise. Her smile thinned. "Because water emergencies do not wait for stubborn farmers to catch up with reality." That one sentence did something useful. It made every man on that crew look at her instead of me. I kept recording. Then I stepped closer to the trench and saw my orange survey marker snapped into two pieces, the top half pressed into wet clay under a boot print. I had paid a licensed surveyor to place that marker 4 days earlier because Vivian's packet had made me suspicious. Now it was lying there like a small broken promise. I picked it up and held it in front of my phone camera. Vivian folded her arms. "You are escalating this." "No," I said, tasting dust on my tongue. "I am documenting it." By noon, they had installed their sign near the fence line. "Silver Pines Emergency Water Access." White letters on green metal. Planted 6 feet inside my property, facing my farmhouse like an accusation. By sunset, an invoice was taped to my front door for $18,700. That was the moment I stopped thinking of Vivian as an irritating neighbor. She had crossed from arrogance into theft with stationery, and she had left her signature on every shovel mark. The first thing I did was call the sheriff. That sounds simple until you are standing beside a trench cut through your own pasture, staring at a sign with somebody else's neighborhood name on it, while a dispatcher keeps asking whether anyone is in immediate danger. I told her no. No shouting. No threats. No emergency lights needed. Just a fence cut, survey markers destroyed, contractors trespassing, and a fake water access zone planted inside my property line like a flag. The deputy arrived 40 minutes later in a tan cruiser with dust baked across the hood. His name was Deputy Hollis, mid-50s, calm eyes, the kind of man who had spent too many years listening to neighbors argue about gates, cattle, dogs, and drainage ditches. He walked the fence line, took photographs, looked at Vivian's sign, then looked at my deed map on my phone. I could see the answer forming before he said it. "Mr. Whitaker, this looks civil." The word civil hit harder than anger would have. Civil is what people say when they want the problem to leave their patrol car and land in your lap. "They cut a fence," I said. "They entered without permission." He nodded like he agreed with me in spirit, but not in paperwork. "I am not saying you are wrong. I am saying if they are claiming utility access or some kind of easement, a judge needs to sort it out." By afternoon, I was at the county office, sitting under fluorescent lights that buzzed like trapped flies. The clerk behind the glass searched the property records, drainage permits, and utility filings. Her keyboard clicked. Her printer coughed. Her face grew more careful with every page that did not appear. No permit for that trench. No current construction filing. No recorded easement under Silver Pines. No emergency order from the county. For about 10 seconds, I felt the clean relief of being right. Then she lowered her voice and said, "You should know Silver Pines as friends here." She did not say names. She did not have to. 2 hours later, the county inspector called me from his truck and said the site appeared to be part of a shared infrastructure dispute. He had not walked the full property line. He had not checked the old pump house. He had not asked for my original deed. But he had spoken to the HOA's attorney, and suddenly my pasture was complicated. That night, the first email went out to the residents of Silver Pines. A neighbor named Carl DeWitt, who owned the feed store down the highway and hated Vivian quietly, forwarded it to me. The subject line read, "Urgent Community Water Protection Notice." I sat at my kitchen table with the laptop glow turning the room pale blue, reading Vivian's version of my life. According to her, I was obstructing essential water infrastructure. I was refusing reasonable cooperation. I was endangering families, seniors, and children during a drought. My old farm, the same one they had been using without asking, was described as a threat to community stability. The coffee in my mug had gone cold. The house was silent except for the soft pop of old wood settling in the walls. I read the email twice, then saved it, printed it, and placed it in a folder marked Silver Pines. The next morning, I met with a local attorney in Mason County. His office smelled like leather chairs and stale paper. He wore a gray suit that looked tired before lunch. I laid out the deed, the photographs, the invoice, the video, the broken survey marker, and Vivian's email. He listened, took notes, then leaned back and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "You have a strong property claim," he said. "But Vivian Cartwright is not just some board president. Her husband donated to 2 county campaigns. The HOA has a legal reserve. They will try to bury you in motions before they ever admit anything." He suggested negotiation, mediation, temporary access, a practical solution. I stared at him across the desk and realized practical was just another word people used when they wanted the quieter person to surrender first. By the end of that week, Silver Pines residents were slowing down on the county road to glare at my gate. Someone left a note in my mailbox calling me selfish. Another person posted online that I was trying to cut off water to the neighborhood. Vivian had done what people like her always do when the facts are weak. She wrapped herself in the crowd and called it morality. But every email had a timestamp. Every invoice had a logo. Every sign had a location. Every lie had a source. So I stopped arguing. I started collecting. I bought a second external hard drive, labeled folders by date, photographed the trench at sunrise and sunset, saved every voicemail, printed every threat dressed up as a notice, and backed up the video of Vivian saying those words beside the broken fence. Existing community infrastructure. By Sunday evening, the folder was 2 inches thick. My anger had cooled into something better. Shape. Weight. Direction. Vivian thought she was building pressure against me. She did not understand pressure. Pressure only matters when it has nowhere to go. And I had spent my whole adult life designing the release valve. The answer was not in the county office, and it was not in Vivian's polished packet. It was under the stairs in the old equipment barn, inside a gray metal filing cabinet that had not been opened in so long the handle left rust on my palm. I found it on a Wednesday night after another Silver Pines email hit my inbox. This one warning residents that I was delaying critical infrastructure repairs. Rain tapped lightly on the tin roof, soft at first, then steady, filling the barn with the smell of wet dust, machine grease, and old hay. A single work light hung from a rafter, throwing a yellow circle over boxes of cracked fittings, mouse-chewed manuals, and rolled survey maps tied with cotton string. I had been searching for 2 hours when the bottom drawer finally gave way with a metal shriek that made me step back. Inside were folders wrapped in brittle rubber bands. Well permits, pump specifications, water quality reports, handwritten maintenance logs going back to 1981. And beneath them, folded into a blue legal sleeve, was a document titled Temporary Water Supply Agreement. My pulse slowed when I saw the date. 1992. The original developer of Silver Pines had signed it with the previous owner of Whitaker Bend Farm, back when Silver Pines was nothing more than scraped dirt, sales banners, and promises painted on plywood. The deal was simple. The farm would provide temporary water access through the Lower Well Field and pump station until the subdivision secured permanent municipal service or until 25 years passed, whichever came first. 25 years. I did the math in my head, then did it again because the answer felt too clean. The agreement had expired 11 years earlier. No extension was stapled to it. No renewal clause had been exercised. No permanent easement had been recorded. The language was plain enough to cut glass. All pumps, wells, holding tanks, service roads, and primary valves remained property of the landowner. I sat on an overturned feed bucket with the paper in both hands while rain drummed harder above me. The whole barn seemed to breathe. For weeks, Vivian had been saying existing community infrastructure like the words themselves could turn theft into law. But the contract in my hands said something different. It said temporary. It said permission. It said mine. Then I found the maps. Thick linen sheets, yellow at the edges, marked with blue ink and careful engineering notes. The main line ran from the lower reservoir to the old pump house, then east beneath what was now Silver Pines Boulevard. The booster valve sat 12 feet inside my property line. The master shutoff sat 27 feet inside it. The access road they had renamed was the original farm service lane, built for maintenance crews with my predecessor's permission, not their ownership. I kept digging. In another folder, I found 3 letters from a law firm in Austin, each addressed to the Silver Pines HOA board. The first warned that the temporary agreement had expired. The second advised the board to negotiate with any future purchaser of Whitaker Bend Farm before relying on continued water access. The third was sharper, dated only 6 months before I bought the place. It stated that continued use without a renewed agreement could expose the association to claims for trespass, unjust enrichment, and unauthorized utility diversion. Vivian's name appeared in the carbon copy line. I read that part 3 times while the rain ticked against the roof and the work light hummed over my head. She knew. This was not confusion. This was not a paperwork mistake. This was not history misunderstood by people trying to protect a neighborhood. Vivian had been warned in writing that the water arrangement was dead, and instead of coming to me like a neighbor, she sent a crew through my fence before sunrise and billed me for the privilege. The last folder held pump logs from the previous caretaker. Gallons per month. Pressure readings. Maintenance costs. Notes about Silver Pines overdraw during summer irrigation. One entry from 2 years earlier was circled in red. Clubhouse fountains and landscape demand exceeding residential estimate. I felt that cold click again, only louder now. Their emergency was not children without water. It was fountains, lawns, and luxury pretending to be necessity. I carried the documents back to the house in a plastic storage tub, holding my jacket over the lid while rain ran down my neck. In the kitchen, I spread everything across the table. The expired contract, the maps, the letters, the logs, the pump diagrams, the invoice, the photographs of the trench, and Vivian's emails. The room smelled like wet paper and coffee grounds. Outside, thunder rolled low over the pasture. For the first time since that trench opened, I smiled. Not wide, not loud, just enough. Vivian had spent weeks trying to make me look like a man standing in the way of water. But the truth was sitting under my kitchen light in black ink and blue lines. Silver Pines had not been protecting their system. They had been stealing time from mine. The temptation was to walk down to the pump house that same night and turn the master valve until Silver Pines finally understood the difference between permission and ownership. I could picture it too clearly. The fountain at their front gate coughing air. Sprinklers clicking dry over perfect lawns. Vivian standing in her driveway with that frozen smile while the pressure gauge on her neighborhood dropped to 0. But anger makes terrible engineering. You never release pressure without knowing where the force will go. There were families in that neighborhood who had no idea what Vivian had done. Kids brushing their teeth. Elderly couples making coffee. People who paid dues because they thought the adults in the room were telling the truth. I was not going to make innocent residents pay for her arrogance. So I did what I had been trained to do. I measured. Thursday morning, I called a licensed surveyor from Fredericksburg, a water rights attorney in Austin, and an independent hydrology consultant I had worked with years earlier. By Friday afternoon, Whitaker Bend Farm looked like a quiet crime scene with better paperwork. The survey crew walked the eastern boundary with tripods and orange vests, their equipment beeping softly in the heat. The hydrologist, a sharp woman named Marlene Price, climbed down into the pump house with a flashlight between her teeth and came back out with dust on her jeans and a look that said Vivian was about to have a very bad month. "Caleb," she said, tapping the side of the pressure tank with her knuckle, "this is not some abandoned farm connection. This is the primary feed." The pump house smelled like iron, damp concrete, and old electricity. The walls sweated in the summer heat. A line of gauges trembled under steady draw, and every few minutes the pump kicked on with a deep mechanical hum that traveled through the floor and into my boots. Marlene showed me where to install a flow meter without disrupting household supply. Legal, non-invasive, documented. Then she pointed at the line feeding east. If they are claiming residential necessity, the numbers will tell us. Water does not lie. That sentence stayed with me. Water does not lie. People do. Boards do. Letters do. But gallons move where they move, and pressure falls where it falls. By Monday, I had a calibrated flow meter installed on my side of the system, cameras facing the pump house door, and a trail camera watching the so-called access zone where Vivian's sign still glared at my pasture. I sent a certified letter to the HOA, not emotional, not dramatic, just clean legal language. The temporary agreement had expired. Their recent entry was unauthorized. Any continued access had to be negotiated in writing. Essential residential use would not be interrupted during the review period, but non-essential irrigation, clubhouse amenities, decorative fountains, and landscaping demand had to stop until ownership and usage could be resolved. Vivian's response arrived by email 3 hours later. She copied the entire board and 2 county officials. She called my letter reckless, coercive, and hostile to community safety. Then she made her mistake. She wrote, in black and white, that Silver Pines had a right to maintain uninterrupted use of all historic water benefits, including common areas, beautification systems, and lifestyle amenities promised to homeowners. Lifestyle amenities. I printed that phrase and slid it into the folder right behind her invoice. That week, I watched the numbers. At 6 in the morning, residential demand rose like it should. Showers, coffee makers, washing machines, normal life. But at 2 in the afternoon, in the worst heat of the day, the draw spiked hard enough to rattle the gauge. At midnight, it climbed again. Not houses, irrigation zones, the clubhouse pool refill, the entrance fountain, the decorative lake beside their walking trail. Millions of gallons a month were leaving my well field to keep grass green enough for sales brochures. I had drone footage by then too, taken from my side of the property line. Sprinklers sweeping across empty medians. Water spilling off sidewalks. The front fountain throwing silver arcs into the dark while the county drought notice sat posted on the public website. Vivian kept telling residents I was threatening their homes. The meter told a different story. I was protecting their homes from the board that had lied to them. On the 10th day, Carl DeWitt forwarded me a notice for an emergency town hall at the Silver Pines Clubhouse. Vivian planned to address the water crisis and community obstruction. My name appeared 3 times before the first paragraph ended. I sat at my kitchen table, listening to the old ceiling fan click above me, and laid out the documents in order. Expired contract, maps, attorney warning letters, flow data, drone photos, camera stills, broken survey marker, invoice, Vivian's emails. Her own words lined up like dominoes. Then I picked up the old brass key I had found in the pump house drawer, the one stamped Whitaker Bend utility room, and put it in my shirt pocket. Vivian wanted a public meeting. That suited me fine. Some truths work better when everyone can hear the valve open. The Silver Pines Clubhouse looked less like a community building and more like a sales office that had learned to smile. White stone columns, blue tile roof, trimmed hedges sharp enough to look measured. The front fountain threw clean arcs of water into the evening air, while a county drought advisory flapped on the bulletin board beside the entrance. I stood in the parking lot for a moment with my document box in one hand and the brass pump house key in my pocket, listening to that fountain splash like an insult. Inside, the room smelled like lemon cleaner, fresh coffee, and expensive perfume. Every chair was full. People lined the walls with crossed arms and tight faces. Some looked angry. Some looked scared. Most looked like they had been told only half a story and were ready to punish the person Vivian had chosen for the other half. Vivian stood at the front beside a projector screen, dressed in a pale blue blazer, her hair perfect, her smile even more perfect. The HOA attorney sat to her right. 2 board members sat to her left. Deputy Hollis stood near the back, not involved, just watching. A county inspector I recognized from the phone leaned against the wall with a clipboard. Vivian saw me walk in and gave the room a careful pause, the kind meant to make an entrance feel like an accusation. "Mr. Whitaker," she said, sweet as syrup, "thank you for joining us. Perhaps now our residents can hear why you believe your personal demands outweigh the water security of 312 homes." Murmurs moved through the room. A woman in the second row whispered something about her grandchildren. A man near the coffee table shook his head at me like I had already confessed. I set my box on the front table. The cardboard made a dull thump. "I am not here to cut off anyone's household water," I said. My voice sounded calm, even to me. That helped. "I am here to show you where it comes from, who owns the system feeding it, and what your board has been hiding from you." Vivian laughed softly. "This is exactly the kind of fear tactic we expected." I looked at her, then at the attorney, then at the residents. Good. Then the documents should be easy to explain. I plugged my laptop into the projector. The first image filled the screen, the 1992 Temporary Water Supply Agreement. The room quieted, not all at once, but in layers. Coffee cups stopped moving. Chairs stopped creaking. I read the key sentence aloud. Temporary access for 25 years or until permanent municipal service is secured. Then I put up the expiration date. 11 years ago. The HOA attorney leaned toward Vivian and whispered. Her smile stayed on, but her fingers tightened around the edge of the podium. Next came the property map. Blue lines traced the well field, lower reservoir, pump house, booster valve, and master shutoff. Every important point sat inside Whitaker Bend Farm. Not near it. Not beside it. Inside it. I heard somebody in the back say, "Wait, that cannot be right." I clicked again. County records. No permanent easement. No active renewal. No permit for the trench. No recorded right to cut my fence. Vivian stepped forward. "These are selective materials." "Then let us include yours," I said. I opened her email, the one where she claimed rights to all historic water benefits, including common areas, beautification systems, and lifestyle amenities. I highlighted lifestyle amenities. A sound went through the room, low and uneasy. People understood those words faster than legal terms. They knew what they had been paying for. I clicked to the flow data. Morning residential use. Normal. Evening residential use. Normal. Then the huge spikes at midnight and mid-afternoon. Marlene's report labeled them clearly, non-residential irrigation and amenity demand. The next slide showed drone photos from my side of the fence. Sprinklers watering empty medians under full sun. The clubhouse pool refilling. The entrance fountain running during drought restriction hours. Then I showed the invoice Vivian sent me for $18,700 after her crew cut my fence and dug through my pasture. I played the video last. Vivian's own voice filled the clubhouse speakers. "This farm has always supported our community. We are just formalizing what already exists." The room turned toward her. Not toward me. Toward her. That was the shift. You could feel it like pressure dropping in a pipe. Vivian's face went pale under the warm lights. She reached for the microphone, but the treasurer, a thin man named Paul Mercer, stood up first. His voice shook. "Vivian, did the board know the agreement expired?" She did not answer quickly enough. That was the answer. The county inspector stepped away from the wall and asked for copies of everything. The HOA attorney closed his folder. Deputy Hollis looked at Vivian's sign in one of my photographs, then at me, and gave the smallest nod I had ever seen. I reached into my pocket and placed the brass key on the table. It landed with a clear metallic click. "That key opens the pump house," I said. "The one on my deed, behind my fence, powered by my well field. I have kept your household water running because your families did not create this problem. But the free ride for fountains, lawns, and false authority ended the moment your board mistook my patience for permission." No one clapped. It was better than that. They went silent. And in that silence, Vivian Cartwright finally heard the sound of her own system losing pressure. The official order came 9 days after the town hall, printed on plain white paper with a state seal at the top in language so dry it felt almost beautiful. Silver Pines Estates was ordered to stop all unauthorized non-essential use of the Whitaker Bend water system, remove the unpermitted trench connection, take down the false access sign, and submit every dollar collected under water infrastructure fees for review. Vivian had spent months wrapping theft in silk ribbon, but the state did not care about ribbon. It cared about permits, contracts, meters, maps, and signatures. By then, the residents had already started asking questions she could not perfume her way around. Why had they been paying water infrastructure fees if the HOA did not own the infrastructure? Why had the board ignored 3 attorney letters? Why was the entrance fountain running through drought restrictions while Vivian told families I was the danger? The next board meeting did not feel like Silver Pines anymore. No soft music. No lemon cleaner. No smiling welcome table. Just folding chairs, restless neighbors, and the hard scrape of truth moving across a room. Paul Mercer, the treasurer, handed over account records and resigned before the vote even started. 2 board members claimed they had trusted Vivian and never read the old files. Maybe that was true. Maybe it was convenient. Either way, Vivian Cartwright was removed as president before 8 o'clock that night. I watched from the back wall, arms folded, my boots still dusty from the pasture. She never looked at me when they took her nameplate off the table. She only stared at the polished wood where it had been, as if authority might leave a shadow if she waited long enough. The financial review found years of fees collected for maintenance that was never paid to the system owner, which happened to be me. The county opened its own inquiry into the unpermitted work. The contractor admitted he never saw a recorded easement. The inspector who called it complicated suddenly remembered how simple property lines could be when the state was reading the file. And that green metal sign, Silver Pines Emergency Water Access, came down on a Tuesday morning while I stood beside the repaired fence and listened to a socket wrench click in the heat. It sounded small. It felt enormous. But here is the part one want people to understand. I did not shut off household water. I could have made a point the loud way. Instead, I gave the residents 90 days under a temporary agreement, with clear limits, fair rates, and a written schedule to either connect to municipal service or sign a legal long-term contract. Their homes kept running. Their kitchens still had water. Their kids still took showers before school. What stopped was the free water for fountains, overwatered medians, and a clubhouse lawn green enough to mock every rancher living under the same drought sky. The front fountain went quiet first. Then the decorative lake dropped a few inches. Then the grass around the gate turned from emerald to honest Texas gold. Funny thing about truth. Once it starts showing, it does not need much help. A month later, I stood at the lower reservoir at sunset, one hand on the cold iron wheel of the master valve, watching the surface catch the last orange light. The pump hummed steady behind me, not strained, not stolen from, just working the way it was meant to work. The repaired fence stretched clean along the boundary. New survey markers stood bright in the dirt. Vivian's trench had been filled, seeded, and marked in my records as evidence paid in full. I thought about her saying water does not care about property lines. She was right about one thing. Water moves where gravity takes it, but law moves where proof takes it. And proof, if you protect it long enough, can cut deeper than any ditch. They thought the water made them powerful. They forgot it had to come from somewhere. And that somewhere had my name on the deed. So tell me, what would you have done if an HOA tried to bill you for your own land, your own system, and your own patience? Because I learned something standing beside that valve. Justice does not always roar. Sometimes it waits, gathers pressure, and opens at exactly the right moment. And if stories like this remind you that quiet people can still win when the paperwork is right, stay with this channel, because there are plenty more places where truth is still sitting underground, waiting for somebody stubborn enough to dig.